Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this small island symbolism model, which will take you through a key scene and explain how you can gain insights into characters through the symbols associated with them. This one will focus on Queenie, and the main symbol we're going to focus on is her mirror. I'm taking this excerpt from when Bernard returns, and she is so scared about the future that holds for both of them. So she says, "My dressing table mirror soon caught me. Hundreds and hundreds of terrified Queenies, scared stiff every one of them, shrieking silently, 'What the bloody hell happens now?' He came in behind me." I remove some quick dialogue they have, and then her narration continues. "Wounded dogs walked with more joy, and my eye caught them again, the Queenies, all wondering now whether Bernard didn't deserve a better homecoming than this. A kiss and a cuddle like Gable and Lay. 'Hop it,' I told them. 'None of their blinking business.'" So this excerpt powerfully shows that the mirror here is more than just a tangible object. The mirror truly gives us a glimpse into what's going on in Queenie's inner life. And the mirror has been used before, so as a reader I can pick up on connections and realize it has to be important. I do want to stress that a symbol is a tangible object in the story. It's really there. It's not like a metaphor or a simile that are comparisons to objects or animals that are not actually physically present. But in the case of a symbol, they're there. So she is literally looking into the mirror, but it represents so much more about her character. Before we get too into the symbol, Before we get into the use of the symbol in this key scene, let's look at rhetorical devices as we've done in the past. The scene makes use of plentiful figurative language and sensory imagery. Beginning with the sensory imagery, in that first paragraph, you see the visual of hundreds and hundreds of terrified Queenies. It's pretty straightforward, but it helps magnify her fear. It is literal. She can literally see all these Queenies staring back at her, but symbolically it represents just how enlarged her fear and trepidation are. Next, you have the tactile detail of scared stiff. So this really helps the reader feel what her fear is like. It's making her constrict all her joints and her bones, and she feels really, really tight because she's holding everything inside. Lastly, you have the auditory detail of shrieking silently. She's been holding everything inside because she's hiding her pregnancy, as we later find out. So inside her head, she's screaming, but she has to retain this silent exterior. So that contrast is quite stark, and it's making her a little mad at everything she has to do. So sensory imagery is really clever in the way it communicates her feelings to the audience through sight, feel, as well as sound. We also have some figurative language, different types of figurative language. So for example, "My dressing table mirror soon caught me." Obviously a mirror can't catch a person, this is personification, but because she does feel guilty about what she's hiding, it is appropriate to use this personification that you would typically think of as a criminal getting caught, being caught in the act. Then you also have "wounded dogs walked with more joy." So this one is in reference to Bernard. Bernard knew he didn't have the best marriage, but he did expect that upon his return home, he would be greeted with some kind of warmth. So the fact that Queenie's turned him away, that Queenie has said, "Well, you can sleep in another bedroom, I'll move your things," makes him feel hurt. Queenie recognizes that, but it's been such a long absence. Bernard has been gone for about 4 or 5 years, 3 years after the end of World War II. The war ended in 1945. He had to stay an extra year in India, and we also find out from his narration that he actually then stayed 2 years in Brighton, in England, but away from London, because he thought he was dying from syphilis after his encounter with the prostitute. Turns out that was false. But you add that all up, that's a long absence. So maybe he didn't expect this great romantic encounter, but he expected a little more than what Queenie was able to give him. Queenie understands that, but she can't bring herself to do that because she's in shock and doesn't know what her future will hold as a result of that. Very importantly, then there's an allusion there's a allusion to a film that starred the actors Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh. That's the reference to Gable and Leigh. And this is a movie that was very popular in the 1940s called Gone with the Wind, set during and after the Civil War. And not only is this important in that it references this classic movie about the American Civil War, but the film is actually also referenced and alluded to at other points in the novel from Queenie herself, but also from Gilbert. So, for example, Gilbert mentions how this is the movie they went to go see when there was the segregated interaction that ended up with a brawl outside of the theater, and that unfortunately led to Arthur's death. So that obviously carries a lot of weight. Moreover, Queenie also mentions it in the earlier part of the novel when she's talking about why she rented out the room. She had a neighbor, Blanche, whose husband was also gone in war, and when her husband came back, they kissed like Gable and Leigh. So clearly, Gable and Leigh are a reference to what a couple should act like, but Bernard and Queenie are nothing like that. There's a lot of irony though, because Gone with the Wind, even though it's romantic, by the end the couple are not even together. So maybe they're not the best reference after all. In addition, the syntax here is very interesting, and it tells the reader quite a bit about how Queenie's style of speaking and writing work. Notice she uses fragments. Hundreds and hundreds of terrified Queenies, scared stiff, every one of them. A kiss and a cuddle like Gable and Leigh, none of their blinking business. All of these, some of them are missing subjects, some of them are missing verbs. They're incomplete. That's part of her style. She's not very formal, but then on top of that, she's so scared and nervous about the future, she can't even complete her thoughts. So Levi's choice to use fragments makes sense here. She also uses a rhetorical question. What the bloody hell happens now? She has no idea what's going to come next. And the reader at this point is not exactly sure why she's so scared. We know that it's been a long absence between her and Bernard, and they didn't have the best marriage to begin with. But later in the novel, we find out she's actually pregnant, and she's days away from giving birth at this point. So when we look back at this scene, we realize, oh, that's why she was so scared. And that's why she didn't understand what the future would hold for her and Bernard once he found out. So the syntax here is part of what makes the paragraphs effective. There's also the hyphen between my eye caught them again and the Queenie. She wants to separate her vision of the truth from that reflection that's staring back at her. For months, she's been hiding her pregnancy, not thinking too much about it. She thought maybe she could go to Canada or something like that. But then once Bernard comes back, that denial comes crashing down, and she has to cope with it now. But she's still fighting against it. And the dash, the hyphen, shows that separation between the reality that's being reflected in the mirror and her wish to just kind of continue to hide it and ignore it. Next, we also have some slang. And again, that's fitting with her style, but here it also helps the reader connect with her more when she's saying, what the bloody hell, hop it, none of their blinking business. Blinking is kind of like the way we use freaking right now, none of their freaking business. So basically, it lets us see that she has to express herself in a way that's natural to her, and that's through slang. So it becomes a lot more authentic as a result. Don't forget structural connections. We already did a little bit of that by looking at Gone with the Wind, but this is not the first instance where Queenie mentions this mirror. So if we go back to her flashbacks earlier in the novel, we can see why the mirror is really an effective symbol for her. So the first time it's mentioned is when Aunt Dorothy brings Queenie to London from her small farm rural town in Lincolnshire. And she says that in the big city, Aunt Dorothy had wanted to start calling me Victoria. It had more elegance as a name. I had my own bedroom, my own wardrobe, and a dressing table with 3 mirrors. If I angled those mirrors just right, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Queenies would appear, all smiling smugly at their good fortune. But not one Victoria was waving at me among the crowd. Don't worry, love, we'll stick to Queenie. It'll do till you're more genteel. So this is the first mention of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Queenies. And it's literal. If she plays around with the 3 mirrors, she can see many, many versions of herself. And at this point, she's so happy. Remember that Queenie hated her life in the farm, hated making meat pies. The one time she went into the butcher's shed, she became a vegetarian after that. So Aunt Dorothy bringing her to the city was like her salvation. So the mirror is a reflection of wealth and opportunity and high class. But she feels like she's not high class. Her aunt wants to call her Victoria, a proper name. Queenie's a nickname. Queenie shouldn't be a child's actual name. But when she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see a Victoria. She's still just Queenie. And her aunt's like, it's okay, we'll keep calling you Queenie until you're more genteel. Genteel, we think it means like full of proper manners and very civil and courteous. But really what it means is high class. You're upper class. You're an aristocrat. So her aunt is saying, you're kind of rough around the edges. We won't call you Victoria yet. Well, we know that years later, she's still Queenie, not Victoria. So there's always been a separation between what she wants to be and who she actually is. And then in that same flashback, when she starts dating Bernard and she's not sure how she feels about him, he's a little boring, he's so quiet. And her aunt's like, no, he's a good man. He's a solid foundation for you. She looks into the mirror to see, well, what do the hundreds of Queenies think? And she says, I moved the dressing table mirror to see what all the other Queenies thought of courting Bernard. Not much. They were all a bit down in the mouth about it. So they're all frowning back at her. So in that case, the mirrors were showing her the reality of how she felt. But because of circumstances after her aunt dies, she goes along with it. So clearly the mirror is something that she turns to, that she hopes to see a good future for herself, but it doesn't always reflect what she wants. Put all of this together, what does it all mean? Clearly a mirror reflects who you are, so we can connect that to identity. And when it comes to Queenie, she's always struggled with that. She struggled from being that butcher's daughter from a poor background who didn't speak properly, and she wants to become a high-class woman who can afford things like a mirror and lily of the valley perfume and makeup and all that kind of thing. She wants to fit into the mold of Bernard's life, but she never quite feels like she does. And then in his absence, she struggles and ultimately fails to be a loyal wife. And the mirror shows the reader all that. So in the key scene I chose, when she's terrified at the prospect of her future because she knows she's pregnant and she knows that Bernard's about to find out, she really cannot stand her own reflection. So she tells her own reflection, hop it, like, get out of here. Just shut up. Stop telling me what I don't want to hear. Because she feels ashamed. She feels guilty. Here's this man that who's returned from war. She doesn't know why he was absent for so long. So all she can feel is guilty about the fact that he went off to war and I cheated and I'm pregnant. Here is the actual proof of what I was unable to do. So it all encapsulates that she wasn't able to live up to those identities. So the mirror reflects the truth of her fear because she knows it's only a matter of time. She can deny it for just a little longer. So notice how in just 2 paragraphs, Andrea Levy provides us with such rich rhetorical devices, syntax, use of slang, and on top of that, a really strong symbol to indicate what the character is like in their internal life. So for the assignment, when you fill out the table, just give me a bullet list of things that really reflect who they are, but then focus on one in a way like I did here in this model. What does that symbol really tell us about them? What connections can we make? Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you found this helpful.